Hello, hi. Welcome back to Aetheral Space.
This guy thought we were reading he thought we were watching Game of Thrones.
Space.
It's a clap.
Aetheral Space 8.6 Scions. We are back.
Yes, welcome.
What happened several minutes ago?
Well, last time on 8.5, Skipper told Musashi, like, the supremacy sucks because they fucking cracked open a bunch of planets and killed all these people just for, like, not wanting to be in the supremacy anymore. And Dragon he met with John and, I'm trying to remember the girl's name, Susie. There were, like, four of them, but those were the two that talked. Yeah, Susan, sorry. And they were like, they seemed to be the people that were a part of that mercenary group. And then John was like, by the way, I can regenerate and don't feel pain. I'm a repurposed. And he was like, Dragon, you have 60 seconds to run before I hunt you down through the tunnels. And Dragon started running. And then North abandoned Ruth to go fight like three dudes. And he's clearly going to help out Smile. I think I got everything.
And Musashi and Skipper had a conversation.
I said that was the first thing I said.
Sorry,
idiots! I smash your head into the wall. Oh man!
Really, you think that will hurt me? Look, there's panacea coming at my wounds
to show you the futility of your actions. I think that's what does it for Panacea, because, like, if it was just regeneration, you could still use overwhelming pain, Chainsaw Man style, but if they don't feel pain either, then the repurposed are kind of like, what do you really do? I guess you could seal them somehow, but that's about it. I was going to ask you a question, but we should probably get reading. I'll ask you after. Don't let me forget. Ruth wasted no time. She ducked down, bolts of plasma flying over her head and singeing her hair. Then, in the same motion, she swept her leg across the floor, the limb buzzing with crimson aether. Two of the guards were sent sprawling down to the ground, and the twin kicks that Ruth unleashed as she rose again, firmly knocked them out. The last guard, his eyes wide with panic, fired at Ruth again, but this time she didn't duck. Instead, she spun on the spot, arm lashing out like a snake, and she caught the bolt of plasma in her hand. It took an obscene amount of aether infusion to spot the plasma from melting through the armor in her skin, but she held strong. The guard's finger curled around the trigger again, but too late. Ruth kicked off the ground and slammed her open hand right into the middle of the guard's chest plate. Her armor had been able to withstand the dissolution, but that clearly wasn't the case for him. The guard staggered back, screaming hysterically as the plasma ate through the metal, dropping his gun in his panic. Well, Ruth was never one to say no to a gift. She caught the rifle before it hit the floor, and then, holding it upside down like a farball bat, she struck it against the guard's head. He went down like a puppet with his strings cut, his scream trailing off into unconsciousness. Is farball cricket?
I mean, it's just like a sport we've heard a couple of times.
Interesting. The mention of it being upside down, I'm curious how it works.
Well, I mean, like she's holding
farball elaboration.
Basically, is what I mean.
Oh, never mind. I thought you were implying they, like, batted upside down. like a baseball player with it straight on the ground and hitting it underneath their legs. Well, Ruth was never one to say no to a whoops. She caught the rifle before it hit the floor, and then holding it, she struck it against the guard's head. He went down like a puppet with his strings cut, his scream trailing off into unconsciousness. She heard a crack when she'd hit him. For a moment, she thought she'd gone too far and smashed his head in, but a little inspection showed she'd only damaged his helmet. Flipping him over onto his back, she unstrapped the metal chest plate from his body and tossed it into the corner of the room, where it continued to collapse into a pile of molten metal. Ruth slapped her hands together as she looked down at the three bodies. Job well done. Now, she looked up from her work, anger already furrowing her brow as she stormed out of the room. Foolishly, she'd given North an inch, and as always, he'd taken a mile. No doubt he'd been lying about the other guards approaching. He'd probably made a run for it and adopted a new identity. Finding him again when he had his guard up would be pretty much impossible. Ruth sighed as she turned into the hallway. First things first, she'd have to get back in contact with Skipper and Bruno, get a handle on what exactly was going on. She stopped. There in front of her was North, smiling cheerfully. Two guards were strewn on the ground before him, twitching weakly and groaning. Dried vomit coated their mouths and chins, and a veritable helping of it had splattered onto the floor, too. Ruth sighed. You asshole. North's smile widened into a grin. What? He asked. Don't trust me? It had been quite the trip. Marie's awareness of her surroundings had been reduced slightly as she masqueraded as a corpse, but she still had a vague idea of the way she had traveled. From the morgue, she'd been sealed in some kind of secure unit, and then that had been placed in an elevator, with a vertical rumbling unmistakable. It had traveled upwards. The module had been retrieved, and here she was. Wherever here was, good thing she wasn't claustrophobic. She'd heard footsteps heading away from her a couple minutes ago, and since then, nothing. No breathing, no shifting of skin or clothes, just sterile silence, and the occasional beep of equipment. She'd be hard-pressed to find a better opportunity. Marie's body sparked back to life in a moment. Her legs became heavy and powerful, tense with muscle, and as she kicked out at the metal above her, it gave way like paper. As it flew up into the air, Marie's hands lashed out like tendrils, multi-branched fingers grabbing onto the lid in the air and slowly lowering it back to the ground. There was no reason to cause too much noise here. She sat up, her arms and legs returning to default as she inspected the pure white chamber. The place was massive, like a warehouse, but most of it was empty. Consoles and monitoring equipments lined the walls, but the space between was occupied only by 6 huge vats, each frothing with
For a moment, that said 6 huge cats. I had to correct it very quickly.
Whoops. 6 huge vats. Okay, so she's popped out of the thing she was in and no one's around her, right? Okay, just making sure I understood. I like zoned out mid-reading for a second and was like, fuck. Blood? No. Maria's nose twitched as it sniffed the air with acuity superior to any machine. The intermingling sense of half a dozen cleaning...
Yeah, cleaning, that should be.
Clearing products? Okay, cleaning products drifted into her nostrils. Gingerly, she got out of the coffin-shaped module, adjusting her ruined tuxedo. That skipper man had really done a number on her. If she wanted to take him out in the future, it would have to be a sneak attack. All he had to do was look at her to cut her to ribbons, after all. Her eyes flicked around the room. The man who'd brought her here, Titan Hasiah, was nowhere to be seen. Where exactly was here, though? They were surely still inside the Exocorp headquarters, but from the way he'd been talking, this place was clearly some kind of secret. Her gaze settled on a small door right in the corner of the room, the red light above it indicating it was locked. It looked flimsy, but she got the feeling that security for something like this was more than met the eye. Thump! Marie whirled around as the heavy sound echoed throughout the chamber. Her eyes turned black as she adjusted them, viewing the world through spectrums ordinary beings could not even comprehend. It took her only a moment to scan the room, confirm nobody was sneaking up on her, and relax her posture once again. Thump! This time it was child's play to ascertain the source of the noise. It was the closest vat, the red liquid in it bubbling incessantly. Curiosity getting the better of her for a moment, Marie took a step forward, glancing at the holographic panel next to it. Enfant 6. Titan Hasiah had used the word enfant in the morgue, hadn't he? So this was what all the fuss was about. Marie turned her head this way and that, trying to get a better look into the opaque vat. But no matter how hard she looked, and no matter what organ she used to look, the liquid did not surrender its secrets. Idiot. Wrong its. She sighed, idly rapping her fist against the glass as she turned away. Thump, thump, thump. Marie turned back, her eyes wide, and as she did, she finally saw the source of the sound. The liquid did not clear, nor did the haze, but a great shadow fell over her as something floated through the crimson. Something huge. It was like a giant human fetus, stark white in coloration, save for its bulbous, staring eyes, which glared a bloodshot red. Its body was undeveloped, its limbs stubby and unfinished, but even so, the strength in it was unmistakable. Oh, I'm just imagining, like, have you ever seen, like, an embryo, like, in the first stages?
Yeah.
That, but just, like, really big and, like, fleshy. The grotesque bulging muscles clearly possessing enough strength to produce a human being to a smear. If that wasn't enough, even curled up in the fetal position, it was the size of a car. How big would it be when it grew? Was this a thing that would grow, or would it remain like this forever? Marie stared up at it, and it stared down at her. Slowly, its movements laboriously slow. New World Order. It reached out and tapped its hand against the side of the glass. Thump! A reflection became clear in the glass, overlaying the grotesque infant. A short, grinning man with a comb-over, his eyes frenzied in rapture. He snuck up on Marie without so much as a sound. Gorgeous, isn't it? Whispered Titan Hasiah. Alright, popcorn.
Okay. They're angry people, Anne said hurriedly, as if that was useful information. People that are angry. Good to know.
I did not know she was Scottish.
She becomes something else every time she speaks. She got panted back. Aether coloured his steps as he sprinted through the cave system. His footsteps echoed incessantly through the tunnels, and in the distance he could hear the alarming laughter of his pursuer. No matter how far he ran, John seemed to be perpetually on his heels. He'd been running for nearly half an hour now, and he was no closer to escaping. These tunnels were labyrinthian, winding on themselves like an insect colony, The Dragon was starting to worry they'd never find his way out even if he did escape. What then? His options were limited, but he did have options. He could continue running, hoping for a stroke of luck that would allow him to finally escape. He could try and hide in these huge caves, hoping that John would pass him by. Or Dragan skidded to a halt, spinning around in the same movement. This chamber was well lit, illuminated by glowing crystals, but it would serve for his purposes all the same. Across from him, the dark mouth of the tunnel waited, no doubt preparing to eject its contents. Running was futile, and hiding was pathetic. The only true option left to him, then, was to fight and win. Dragan raised his fists, assuming a combat-ready posture, and a spark of pale red aether, and his hand exploded. It was sudden, unpredictable. 1 second his hand was fine, the next it had been blown apart in a puff of red smoke. Blood spurted out from the wound as Dragan fell to his knees, clutching the limb in his remaining hand. His fingers had been severed at the base, leaving him little but a form and assorted gristle, twitching impotently. He tried his best to hold it back, but a strange scream escaped his throat all the same. It was answered by more laughter from the tunnel, still some distance away but growing closer. John called out to one of his comrades, saying something, but in his state of agony, Dragan was in no state to pay attention. No, he couldn't falter, he couldn't surrender to the pain. He had to keep his mind, hold it in this present moment, and squeeze it for all it was worth. Dragan dragged himself to the far corner of the cavern, among the jagged rocks and stones, keeping himself as quiet as possible. He'd worried that Anne might make a noise, but the girl was surprisingly docile, especially with what had just happened in front of her. Clearly there was something more going on with her, but now wasn't the time to think about it. Now was the time to think about what the hell had just hit him. The explosion must have been incredibly powerful. He'd been infusing his hands with aether to attack, and his fingers had been torn apart all the same. What was the delivery mechanism, though? Would he be hit by it again? There was no way of telling. He didn't have enough evidence to guess. White-hot pain still pulsing into his body, he looked down at his hand, and what he saw there was even stranger than the explosion. Orange panacea, like melting wax, was pouring liberally from his wounds, sculpting itself into the shape of his missing fingers. As he watched, the form of those protrusions shifted, from talons to claws to boneless flaps of skin to actual human digits. Finally, the orange colour faded, leaving Dragan with a fully functional hand once again.
How long did that whole sequence take?
Well, he got blown up, then 10 seconds later he went over to it, and over the course of 30 seconds he was watching this shit happen.
Okay, so it took about 30 seconds to regenerate his
40
hand.
seconds. Because the 10 seconds where he was
Gotcha.
ah. Even the pain was gone,
Very
replaced by a
interesting.
tingling sensation as nerves reconnected. He only mouthed the words, but it resounded through his head like a death bell. What the fuck? Marie took a cautious step back as she turned to look at Titan Asaya, ready to attack the second he came closer. He did not come closer. Instead, he just stood there, his hands clasped behind his back, smiling serenely as he looked up at the creature in the tank. I'll admit, he said as if they were having a casual conversation. Aesthetically, they're not the most... but it's a work in progress. At least in the start, we should pursue function over form, don't you think? Marie hid one hand behind her own back, and as she did, long claws sprouted at the ends of it, thin and sharp enough to pluck a heart from a chest. If Asaya tried anything, he wouldn't live long enough to regret it. Marie never missed. Let's add that in. It's fucking badass.
Guy writing his OCs. So good. I love watching that in real action. I love it.
What is that thing? She demanded, jerking her head towards the demonic embryo. And what are you people doing here? Asaya frowned as he rubbed his chin and with his other hand gestured to the holographic panel. Why, it says right there, he explained. It's an enfant, one of 6 so far. And when you say, you people, well, I understand how you could get that idea, but this is really more of my own personal project for the moment. I have ever supplied the raw material out of necessity, really, but the actual work is all mine. I don't mean to brag, but that's just the way it is.
What the fuck is an enfant?
Well, it's a thing. Marie narrowed her eyes. Asaya still hadn't moved from his initial position, but she got an unmistakable feeling of danger from him. Answer the question, she demanded, voice cold. What are you doing here? Asaya sighed, hands returning behind his back as he looked up at the enfant. The creature's eyes had rolled up into its skull and it had stopped moving. Was it asleep? Benassi is a wonderful thing, isn't it? Just miraculous, he murmured. Seamless growth and imitation, and these people use it to fix cuts and bruises. I couldn't believe it when I found out how far it could be taken, the sheer potential that was being wasted. Marie's eyes darted to the floating infant. This thing is panacea? How? Clusters of human cells, Saya sighed in happiness, harvested from the dead, pulped and perfected, nurtured as the farmer tends the flock. Only one cell in a million was fit to be used. Then my enhanced panacea grows an entire body from that stock, and I cut away from the greater mind to give it consciousness.
One cell in a million sounds like really special at first, and then you realize that could be like several cells in a body.
Well, yeah, but it's still like you can get many from one body.
Yeah, true.
That last part has caused some trouble, but still. He looked back to her, smiling. Progress is inexorable, despite the world's best efforts.
That's also so funny to me because it implies like, this corpse is average. Wait, that fingernail! An exceptional cell. It's working so hard.
She shook her head. You're crazy. Really? I think I've approached this fairly rationally. I've covered my tracks, used only the forgettable, compensated my minor collaborators. Where exactly is it you think I've misstepped here? Marie took another step backwards, her back thumping against the vat. The glass was disturbingly warm and moist. And witnesses like me, she asked, already knowing the answer, what happens to us? Well, Isaiah sighed, looking down at his feet. As I said, progress is inexorable. He took a step forward. His footstep echoed throughout the room, bouncing off the walls, slithering against Marie's ears. Within the first microsecond of hearing that sound, Maria moved, and it was a movement no human bodies could surpass. Her clawed arm engorged with muscle and became a blur, tearing off Isaiah's head with a single swipe. But Titan Isaiah's blood did not pour forth. Only red smoke rose from his neck, like it was a chimney. But Titan Isaiah's headless body remained standing. Its hands swayed at its sides, but its footing remained firm.
Oh!
But Isaiah's head, clutched in her hands, spoke. Tears were running down from its eyes. I suspected, he said, a smile of pure bliss on his face. With your deceit, I of course suspected. But to have it confirmed, oh. It would have been child's play to crush his skull in her hand. But all Marie could do was stare down at it in disbelief. She, of course, had reached the exact same conclusion he had. Headless.
Are they both gene tyrants?
Headless, Isaiah's body took another step forward, and this time she took no action to stop its advance, nor did she prevent it from planting its hands on her shoulders. As it did, she could hear the bones of its legs and back creak and crack as it grew taller, towering over her. A slimy, prehensile tendril emerged from the tattered neck, plugging itself into Isaiah's skull and gently tugging out of Marie's hand. His head, still suspended by the cord, swayed in the air, weeping. To think there were others of my kind, he whispered, almost inaudible. Oh. Marie found that tears were running down her own face too. For 100 years she thought herself alone, felt isolation crush down on her like the pressure of the ocean floor. And now, here, that weight had been lifted by one single fact. Marie Hazard wasn't alone in this world.
Yeah, but imagine you're in an apocalypse and finally you meet one other person, they're fucking crazy. Oh my god. So I had a couple things I wanted... there was one main thing on video I wanted to ask you, which is unrelated to this. Good chapter, by the way. Very, very interested to see where this goes, but we were talking last night and I was curious. I know you mentioned Dragon can't just like straight up absorb Aether, but can he Gemini absorb Aether constructs like, say, a fifth dead swordfish?
He could, though, yes.
Interesting.
But he can't, like, alter
but not like a heartbeat.
It's purely, it goes in, it goes out. He can't, like, mess around with it that much when it's in there.
So he can suck up a heartbeat bayonet?
Well, that's not really projectile.
Well, technically it's sound. He can't
you would
record
have to,
sound.
like, see it coming, basically. You would have to know about it, like, catch it, being ready to catch it.
Oh, I guess because it's sound, you don't see the moves.
Yeah.
I always imagine them with like the green aura around them, but
Yeah,
I guess they
invisible.
can technically be invisible. Yeah, but in the anime, they make it green for the visuals. Even though it's invisible.
But then you don't change the plot, so there's like a big plot hole.
Yeah, didn't Naruto do that?
Giant great swords like spinning around.
I feel like a ton of anime have done that before. I swear that's like an old anime thing. It's like it's invisible, but they fucking put lights or whatever around it for the visuals. Oh man, Dragon. Why doesn't he have like a? I guess none of the others are really that special. I guess, like, what good would it be to record, like, a Serena sword if you're Dragon?
You could record, like, one of Aether boosting shots. You could do that.
I get true, and then he could always have a buff ready.
Yeah,
that's interesting because Aether like it kind of regenerates over time, right? So she could like put all her power into that. He could record it. She'd get her power back, and then they have like a free buff.
Yeah,
nice. What is the Aether regeneration rate?
It depends on the person.
How fast is it though? Like a day, several days, a couple of minutes? Yeah. Oh, okay. Deja vu, okay. I'm very excited to see where this goes. Because he's a weirdo, but clearly she's happy there's another one of her kind. I wonder if he's going to help her with the needles, or like if she's going to betray Musashi, or what's going on here. I'm very excited about this. I would be lying if I said I wasn't currently more interested in the B plot than the A plot here with Dragon. Like, I'm very interested in this whole, like, secret underground biology gene tyrant bullshit. And also, is this how gene tyrants work? Because, like, they've been described almost godlike, and they, of course, like, can warp at will. But, like, when they made cogetons and shit, did they use, like, labs and science, or was it just, like,
labs and science.
Genetic magic? Yeah, so he's just, like, doing his bullshit, right?
Yeah.
Making special creatures like the person on Yazlov did. Infants. Marie should just have a lab where she makes a toy Musashi.
Well, she doesn't have the knowledge of a gene tyrant. She can just do the stuff. She does not necessarily, like, a good genetic engineer.
Yeah, guys, wait until Marie gets her hands on a biology textbook. It's over for humanity.
She can't necessarily, like, cure your diseases.
She needs a lab.
She's like, just stop having the disease. It's easy.
Actually, that's a good point. If gene tyrants reach their power from biology, is like biology knowledge banned in the supremacy in the UAP?
Like, it's mostly the genetic engineering that people have a taboo against, except for like certain parts of the galaxy.
Interesting. So I wonder if like that information's restricted. Very curious.
Well, there would have been a period after the revolution was like the book burning period, I would say.
Yeah. Very, very curious. All right, well, I'll end the recording there. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.